Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is John Park and welcome to another tutorial series. So in this demo, I'm going to show you guys kind of my process. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so typically for this sketch or this illustration, I'm going to go a little bit more landscape and go around 4,000 pixels. And this time, instead of, normally I usually start with kind of like usually a tone, but this time I'm actually going to go ahead and sketch out and rough out our ideas in a really loose black and white fashion. And I'm just kind of sketching out the overall proportion, the shapes, and the overall composition of what we see here. And you know, at this phase, it's like a lot of what I'm thinking about is just design, the overall shot, and mainly the main focus, which is kind of this water, you know, filtration system or something, some sort of device that's actually connected at the edge of this waterfall here. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And you know, just graphically kind of breaking, you know, blocking in and breaking up the space, you know, using darks and lights as kind of my main kind of I guess readability. You know, I don't want to just kind of quickly block in too many values. You know, I want to use what I have and just figure out kind of my direct light source. So I know that my light source is going to come from the left, and I kind of want some sort of indication of like maybe some foreground here, maybe some trees, some indication of rocks or cliffs, with water that's basically going to be splashing over a large waterfall here. Maybe our structure looks something like this. And again, like, I'm not necessarily thinking about specifics, just the overall mass and the overall shape. You know, there's different ways where you can go about this. Is if you wanted to start off with a loose sketch and then work in your graphic breakdown or your graphic sketch on top, you can do so. I just kind of did a hybrid here where I'm actually just working with the sketch and the graphic study at the same time, because in terms of the actual details, I'm still not too sure where I'm going. I just have a very loose idea, so I'm not really married to anything. I'm just kind of looking at it and just, you know, plotting things in, and obviously trying to feel out kind of the overall graphic readability of my sketch. I really enjoyed this particular process because, you know, a lot of you know, what's easy for me to see, you know, before we get into the color is really just the immediate graphic read, right? So that's like all the trees, you know, it's just some loose indication of where we're gonna see light, highlights, and things like that. Maybe just some distant horizon here, just kind of sketching it in and trying to be very loose. You know, that's one of the goals is I want to stick with, you know, a very painterly kind of aesthetic. So I want to make sure that all my decisions are relatively loose but intentional, and that's kind of the goal here. So maybe block in some like extra bits of, you know, structure here. I don't know if it's like, you know, part of the actual architecture or if it's like piping or something like that. Maybe we see more like remnants or indication of like, you know, some girders or something over here. And just again thinking about just kind of the shapes, and this painting is purely, it's all about the shapes, right? It's all about how the shapes are juxtaposed next to each other to give a sense of contrast, but also some sense of scale and nice you know, sense of kind of believability with, you know, like if we're seeing trees or if we're seeing some sort of man-made structure here. Now, I guess it is safe to say that, you know, if you guys are ever doing a sketch like this, be sure to, you know, always do research. You know, have something available on the side. You know, I actually have a bunch of like National Geographic photographs of, you know, waterfalls or dams and things like that, and you know, I just kind of had to open on the side, and I just kind of combined the two. But one of the things that really did help me was having just an image, you know, something to just think about when I was composing this this shot, because a lot of times when you get stuck, you don't want to just rely on your own personal visual library, even though that's where a lot of our decisions and a lot of our, you know, visual taste comes from. But a lot of times, if you're ever stuck, it's because you've kind of run out of ideas, right? So when you run out of ideas, you want to refer to these references. You want to be able to kind of quickly, you know, get back onto this momentum that you built, and find a solution for every step along the way. My brain actually goes back and forth, because, you know, when I'm doing an exercise like this, I'm thinking about not only the design but also just some of the illustration principles of you know, lost and found edges, you know, keeping things very intentional, very painterly, and areas very very interpretive and loose, and just thinking about that, the amount of contrast in this shot. All right, let's go ahead and just kind of add a little bit more detail here. I mean, we're still keeping it pretty loose. You know, I'm actually not really zooming in at this point. We're just kind of sketching from a distance, because I kind of want to see what everything looks like here. You know, like the other thing that I really enjoy about working this way is that, you know, there's no real commitment. It's just kind of, yeah, let's just see what looks cool, you know. And you won't know until you try, and that's one of the key things that I really try to emphasize or focus on when I'm doing these exercises, is that I'm constantly looking for, you know, different ways of problem solving and creating a unique design or an image. You know, trying things out, seeing if it works, seeing if the shapes are good. You know, if they're not good, then, you know, might as well just you know, start over and try again, you know, because it's still sketch, it's still good. Thinking it might be kind of cool to add like maybe some sort of circular, you know, disc or some sort of detail here. Maybe some sort of like antenna or something like that. More scaffolding type of structures. And notice how our focal point is this central tower. It is this circular object here with all the little bits. So a lot of my brush strokes, a lot of my details are going to get really dialed in here. I definitely don't want to, you know, have any other detail outside of this area, because then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a focal point, or an emphasized, you know, focal point. Thought it might be kind of cool to have some sort of ring as well. Let's make a stroke. Let's make it a little bit bigger here. And I was thinking it might be cool as some sort of like structural element here. And this can be some sort of you know, radius object that kind of revolves around the this water structure or tower. Maybe duplicate it. Let's go ahead and erase this one out, or paint it out. I definitely want to play with the lost edge, and you can see as it's as the left side is actually going into the waterfall, you don't really quite see the object. You know, it's kind of getting hidden, or kind of it's disappearing behind the waterfall. That's a more indication of water. I think it might be kind of cool to add quite a bit of water here. Maybe just some large amount, but first let's go ahead and see if there's anything else that we can add to the structure here. Maybe some more vertical elements. It's funny working this way. I've been so used to working with photos and just applying a photo texture to kind of help answer any details that we need, but you know, being able to indicate and sketching in some designs and details in this fashion, one, it makes the overall illustration look a lot more interesting, right? A lot more painterly, because you know, you're putting in things that you only want the viewer to see, and you're leaving other things out for interpretation. And that's kind of the cool part about working this way. So when you work with the photograph, it's just kind of all there, right? And there's quite a bit of information, and it can almost overpower, you know, your statement. And so I would say, you know, my goal here is to try to get as much information manually by painting it in, and if I need any more aid, then I'm gonna start introducing some photo textures, which I will towards the later part of this demo. But for now, I just want to mainly focus on just trying to get as much of it dialed in at this phase before we move on to color, or moving in and putting in some photo textures and things like that. You know, just kind of lose some of those edges here, and really just focusing on the illustrative quality of lost and found edges. All right. Now let's get into a little bit of color here. I'm gonna put this on overlay, and I kind of picked like a green as my base local color to start blocking in. And this is kind of my way of colorizing the image, and just trying to find a nice balance of greens and some nice tones to kind of give this like a real, like, you know, Amazon type of you know, colored tone or palette for this kind of waterfall. Yeah, I know there's gonna be a lot of trees out there, some foreground trees here. Now this method, again, you know, please take with a grain of salt, because it doesn't always work in every instance, because if you have an image that has a lot of color, you're just going to have to paint those colors in manually. As we're here, I'm using the black and white sketch as really a base for a lot of our shapes, and I'm just colorizing that those black and white areas. So this is something that I would say just try out. Alright, let's just kind of add in some of these nice cooler values for the shadow side here. And again, like this process, I'm just kind of glazing in, and I'm using a multiply layer just to kind of get in some of the colors here. You know, you can use multiply, you can use darken, but I'm just trying to, it's trying to just kind of tone the overall palette here. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of warm here by just taking out a little bit of the blue. It's funny because the moment you take out the take away the blue, the light appears to be warmer. So it's just this strange and funny illusion that our brain just understands how to look at the shapes, or look at the colors, and kind of the temperature variations. All right, let's go ahead and add a little bit more blue here on the surface of the river. And again, everything's under the multiply layer. And I'm just gonna go ahead and darken this just a little bit more. And if you guys ever feel like you need, ideas or inspiration for color, look at photo reference. Look at existing shots of things that are very close to what you're painting. I mean, I always look at and reference real life photography, just to kind of see the temperatures of color and the variations of color that exist. I know sometimes it seems a lot more special when you're coming up with all the colors on your own, but I think it's a lot easier if you have a strong visual library, if you've done a lot of landscape painting and things like that. But if you haven't, and if you're someone like me who hasn't really done a lot of landscape painting, then my point of reference is going to be using these photo elements, using and looking at even other artwork or other photographs or other documented films, and just seeing how the light and shadow really interacts with each other. So I'm adding a new layer here on top, and I'm just kind of putting in a little bit of a warm here on the surface. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of refine this shape as well, just to give it a nice crisp edge. But also, since we already blocked in like kind of our general shape, adding another layer on top will allow us to kind of make any edits, anything that we want to add in or take out, we're gonna do using a new layer on top. So now I have all of my base colors kind of blocked in. Now we can start going in and doing another detail pass. Gonna go ahead and use a overlay and use the pattern stamp tool. I will have a segment on how to create this towards the end of the video. But basically I'm using this to just kind of help generate some color. And basically the pattern stamp more or less acts as a way of just kind of putting in a photo texture or a pattern that you've collected, whether it's from a abstract painting or a texture or something of that nature, and you can just kind of implement it and put it on without having to import the image. It's a great way to just kind of get just some colors going, and just kind of move things around and just see what we can work with here. I'm already really liking the palette. It has a really nice feel to it. Kind of this like slight bounce light feel. This warm color palette. I mean, I think it has a nice juxtaposition with the cool shadows here. Just kind of editing out and kind of giving a little bit of a lost edge here. just really refining the shapes more and just the details around. You know, a lot of this stuff I'm not completely 100% sure what this is going to be. You know, in this small little area, I'm thinking it might be a cool some sort of engine, or maybe just kind of like a little deck or something. Maybe I can have like a little antenna here of some sort. That might be kind of cool. Maybe there's something that kind of protrudes from this point. And what's funny, what's cool, or I wasn't gonna say funny, but it is funny that now that I have, if you look at all of those other loose underlined sketches, kind of the scaffolding and things like that, look how loose it looks, right? But it's kind of okay because that's not really in our main focal point. So I'm actually going to keep it fairly loose, and I'm going to start dialing in and really tighten in on this area, this part of the actual structure, you know, and start working with a smaller brush, you know, and a smaller details, just to really amplify this up. Right, zoom in just a little bit more, just so we have a little bit more control here. And I'm thinking it can be like, there can be like this entire structure that kind of is filtering the waterfall here of some sort. Maybe we can have like a command center or some sort of maybe bridge or something to help kind of support this sphere. So I'm gonna add this in here. So I'm just kind of adding in a little bit of light here to start indicating the direction of light. And just maybe some more structures back here. A lot of these little details, like these support bars, really help give scale. So anything that you can do to kind of help sell the overall scale, you know, this is definitely the time to do it. And notice, like, a lot of the small shapes are only going to exist in this area, so I'm going to continue to add more smaller details. Just kind of double check and make sure everything is in the right layer. Just going to punch in some more negative spaces here. I'm just gonna slowly start refining some of the edges here, like maybe like a little bit of highlight is catching the edge of this. Start indicating some more detail here. And that's one of the things, is that I'm gonna constantly add and just clean up some of this area, like things like this right here, this scrap, like anything that's kind of breaking the silhouette. I'm gonna just kind of reinforce the shape. Maybe add just a little bit of cool lighting, you know, coming from the sky here. So I imported this photograph here. This is where I'm gonna start thinking about ways to indicate or import just some textures, and maybe even some details in our focal point. Again, so because we kind of have a majority of things blocked in, this might be a good opportunity for us to just kind of place in some nice extra details like this. So I'm thinking it can be some sort of like large industrial pipe. With some scaffolding type structures here. And again, just anything that I can do to help kind of reinforce the overall structure or the feel of it. This is nice here. Let's go ahead and reveal this here, and maybe just a little smaller, and maybe we can get it to kind of read a little bit brighter. So when I place in these photo textures, I obviously want to paint over them. You know, I don't want it to retain just the just the pure photo feel. You know, I want to use some of the information, but definitely add in my own flair or my own adjustments on top. I'm gonna go ahead and knock down the value just a little bit here, so it's all kind of within the same value range and the light direction. And maybe here just a little bit more of a soft edge. I'm going to darken this down a little bit. And just kind of lose a little bit of that edge there. And what's great is, like, I'm putting it on a mask so that I can quickly just paint in or paint out and make these quick edits. I'm going to take away the darks here using the blend modes. If you guys haven't tried this out, go ahead and double click on a layer and you'll actually open up this mode here. I'm going to go ahead and compress it. And I'm going to brighten it up, just so we're getting the same intensity of highlights here. So I'm going to go ahead and also just kind of darken this down, because again, we don't need the entire thing to be bright. I just only need certain sections. So this instantly gives us so much nice scale here. I'm going to go back to the paintbrush and just start adding a little bit more structure here. I'm thinking these can be like some sort of like batteries or some kind of engine that kind of runs on the outside. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of paint over this these little photo textures that I added on. The values and stuff are kind of in line, so I'm definitely gonna keep the lighting scenario there, but anything additional I'm gonna definitely paint. Let's see here. I was thinking like maybe we can add this little yellow accent of some sort here. Maybe just a little sliver, some sort of graphic might be kind of cool. And And again, just simplifying, because a lot of the photo elements are, it is pretty dense, and it's also very busy. So this is the time to kind of edit and just kind of add in your own painterly, marks here, because you do want things to feel consistent. So this is where I wanted to try to be a little bit, intentional with my marks, and not make it feel like, it looks like there's a photo just kind of slapped in there, even though there's some areas that are very obvious. I definitely want to try my best to kind of have a nice seamless look here. Maybe a little bit of a cast shadow. I remember one of the things that really got me inspired to do this piece was looking at a few photographs of actual like engine testing areas. There's like these kind of like these structures that that car companies use, like Volvo, or sometimes other really, luxurious cars, where they actually test out jet engines, and they kind of have like these spherical looking objects, and that's kind of what inspired me to do this particular piece. Alright, so just adding a little bit of some more cool light here. I just thought it might be kind of cool because we're getting a lot of the bounce light, which I can definitely justify. There's a lot of light that's coming from, that's seeping in from the left, but I definitely want a lot of the cool light to kind of fill in, because it isn't receiving direct light, so a lot of it's going to be in shadow. And we lost a little bit of this this little tower here, so maybe we can just bring just a little bit back, and just kind of hide whatever we don't need and just bring back what we do want. I think the trickiest thing for me when I was doing this particular sketch was knowing when to kind of let go of all the details. I think I always ask myself, like, when you're doing a sketch, there's a certain energy to the sketch, but when you're doing a rendering, the energy instantly goes away. It's mainly because of a lot of things, but one of the major things is that it's being, one, overworked, and two, it doesn't have that impressionistic feel that we originally captured in the beginning. So as I refine the sketch, the goal is to still maintain the true kind of, the essence of it feeling really loose, still feeling really interpretive, and still keeping it really alive. And then that's one of the biggest challenges for me when I was doing this, and just making sure that there's areas of interpretation and there's areas of definition. So it's constantly keeping that balance. And when I look at very successful paintings, it definitely achieves such a nice contrast between something that's truly defined versus something that's very, very, very loose and very interpretive. Just adding in a little bit of this, cooler light. I definitely kind of want this, not necessarily neutral blue, but more of this purple tone here. Add in a little bit of the water, the white water that's created from breaking down here. And just kind of have a nice soft edge. And as I make a mark, I'm gonna try to make a mark and also just try to loosen up some of the edges here, because that's kind of like what's great about a waterfall, is that there's some definition and form, and then as it breaks, it turns into mist, right? It kind of loses its structure. I want to add a little bit of warm light here and just kind of help define some of this area here. Maybe just start defining a little bit of the edges here, because a lot of these waterfalls, when I was looking at some references and just photos on Google, a lot of times you'll get these cliffs and you'll actually get a lot of vegetation growing on the edges here. So I definitely want to indicate what that would look like. Maybe just simplifying this area here. And you can just see as I turn it on and off, just kind of seeing and evaluating if we're making all the right decisions. Add in some sort of like triangular or hexagonal type of shape here. Might be a really cool like panel design or something. So let's go ahead and just add that in. Maybe a little bit of cool lighting. Add in some more marks here, just more structure, just to indicate. But just keep in mind, a lot of the details I definitely wanted here, because it's going to have the highest amount of contrast, and definitely I want the highest amount of interest here. So a lot of my smaller shapes, all the details that we're going to add in or suggest is going to be in this area. And notice how small my brush strokes are. They're really tiny, right? Like pencil thin. The reason being is that, again, we want the focal point here, so a lot of the shapes are going to be smaller, just to suggest a lot of detail. So we're about close to 38 to almost 39 minutes in. Again, this particular type of painting, I thought it would actually take longer, but we're almost about halfway. And I think there's something interesting about working this way, is that I'm not necessarily noodling this thing to death. I'm trying to not overwork the image. I just want to say just enough, There's something that I actually remembered a teacher telling me, that a good image isn't an image that has been spent or that has been invested a lot of time. A good image basically conveys what it needs to convey. So even though I know that this image didn't take me as long as anticipated, I felt like I was achieving the right kind of decisions and the right kind of elements for this image to work. So that part I was really actually pretty happy about. Just kind of getting it to read the way I wanted to read, and just being able to let go of of all the looser areas. I mean, you look around to the horizon. I mean, just that mark is literally just a simple, you know, gesture that just indicates the horizon. You know, there's nothing that's defined. It's just kind of purely suggestive, and that's kind of what I want to continue to retain. So I added a lighten mode here, as you kind of see. I'm just kind of toggling between a lighten and normal mode, but I wanted to give it a little bit more atmospheric push, you know, as I continue to kind of define some of these areas. But I don't want a lot of the shadows to get too dark too quickly, unless it's inside or underneath the sphere object. And I definitely like the soft edge here, right where the soft edge is hitting the water, right? So the highlight of the sphere and the water is definitely creating a soft edge. Just what's something that I did learn about soft edges is that it's kind of an area or a moment for our eyes to escape the composition or to escape the shape. And I found that to be very valuable, because I think that's what allows our eye or the image to kind of move around. You know, when you have these moments of, you know, lost and found edges, it makes the painting or the image breathe, you know. So anytime you have a defined form, I think it's smart to create areas where your eye can kind of follow and look at the object or the forms, and then kind of blend out into the background, you know. So it's kind of nice that we have this water element, because we can just basically say, well, this is a lost edge because there's water here. But also artistically, it kind of works in our favor, because now we have a lost edge that kind of creates a nice aesthetic balance. Adding in some more smaller shapes here. Just so that in terms of the rhythm, you know, we're kind of getting nice large, medium, and small shapes. I'm going to go ahead and use the pattern stamp tool. I found kind of a nice texture of grass, kind of this greenish grass here, that I'm going to go ahead and just kind of use to apply to kind of get a variation of greens here. Really, really nice way of getting some variety of colors, especially for anything that's like foliage or tree related. Maybe just a little bit here. And I'm using this very sparingly too, because, you know, I don't want it to be everywhere. I just want it to be in the right areas. I think it might be neat to have maybe some sort of like greenhouse or some sort of like man-made landscape back here. So again, using the pattern stamp tool to get kind of these nice greens. And there we go. Make sure I have a nice little overlap. I don't want any tangents here. Maybe some sort of like water tower, or I'm thinking about something to have something there. Let's see what we got, what else we can pull here. Oh, maybe this little thing. Let's see here. Maybe this little piece right here might be nice. Even though I can probably, and most likely I probably should paint all this stuff. You know, if there's a piece that you find that you can use, why not? Let's go ahead and use it. You know? Just gonna go ahead and clean it up a little bit. And then let's go ahead and duplicate this. There we go. We have kind of like a little water house kind of like structure here. I don't know how many we should make, but I know generally 3 is a really good number in terms of repetition. A good rule of thumb is anything that's repeating, you want 3 or more. Anything that is symmetrical, you want at least 2. Anything that's unique, you want 1 of. So that's something that I learned, you know, a while back when I was studying industrial design. Is when you're working with patterns, you want to generally make sure that you have, if you're working with a pattern, you want to make sure you have 3 or more. If you're working with something that's symmetrical or meant to be identical, then you want to make sure you have at least 2, right? That generally helps kind of convey that, you know, the things that you're designing or building is symmetrical or it's repetitive. So I'm thinking like it might be kind of cool to have like some sort of, you know, lawn or some sort of green little landmark here or something. Maybe they kind of test the waters or use it for watering certain plants, you know? Even though this is kind of like a a research facility or some sort of like big engine filtering station, maybe they use parts of it to kind of look at the, you know, some chemicals or maybe some minerals in the water, and this is kind of how they test it. I'm totally BSing here, but you know, anything to make this kind of justify or make it look and feel more sci-fi. Maybe there's some like little ports here, so I'm just gonna sketch in some little lines that kind of show that off a bit. It's interesting because now, as I'm spending more time on this, our eyes just kind of quickly glaze over all of the other details in the back. And again, it's just kind of, I need to constantly remind myself that I shouldn't noodle or try to resolve anything else in the background, because it's going to kill the essence of the sketch, right? So I got to constantly tell myself, it's okay, just leave it, everything is good, you know, keep it the way it is. Don't overwork it. It was the hardest thing to do because my brain is telling me, you know, it's like, it's so unfinished, you know, look at the brush strokes, it's bad. And it's one of those things where it's like, no, it's actually a really good thing. You know, it's good to keep areas very interpretive and loose. Alright, let's go ahead and add a little bit of cool light here. Because it is on the shadow side, I do want to still make sure, you know, our lighting is consistent, and also our temperatures are consistent too. So anything that's like, again, not facing directly the light, I want to make sure it's going to get a little bit of the blue. Maybe just a little bit of highlight here. Okay, let's go ahead and move this layer down and compress it. Add a little bit of shadow here. Okay. So there's still a couple of things that I want to do. I definitely want to add more of the rock features over on the right hand side. I want to refine some of the edge of the water, and maybe just a little bit more of the foreground. But we're going to take it one step at a time. So let's go ahead and just kind of double check, and I'm going to add another layer here. And you know, I added a layer here just so that it's behind all this stuff here, so I can get some nice value separation. And thinking that, let's go ahead and just start refining this edge here, because again, even though this is the water line, you know, it's not going to, you know, have a wonky shape, and it's going to be relatively flat. I mean, you can have little areas kind of protrude that we can start to add in. However, you know, I still want to make sure that we can clearly see the water shape, or just a water line. Excuse me. Alright, so I'm going to add in some textures from the pattern stamp tool. Get in some of that nice green in there. Again, nice variations. Go ahead and just kind of color pick. And what's great about using the pattern stamp tool is that I'm able to sample and use the colors that we got from there. Again, I still want to make sure I keep it kind of loose, you know, but I still want to still indicate some nice variety of color there. And you'll see me kind of hopping around. I think one of the things that I always want to make sure that, you know, that the sketch stays really fresh, right? So I don't want to get too caught up or noodle one area too much. I want to make sure I'm kind of bouncing around and I still have like a kind of a fresh perspective on what we're drawing here. Adding bits of detail here. Maybe add something here. Not quite too sure what to add in terms of specifics, but I know that something needs to be on the sphere. Going to turn it on and off. Alright, maybe just a streak of light too, because again, I think this is pretty cool, this little patch of grass, but maybe just a little streak of light here cutting through. That's a little too bright. Oh, a little too bright here. And I'm using the color dodge tool just to kind of brighten up that area. Some extra little bits. Maybe some sort of like solid shape here. Continue to refine. some of the tree line in the back. Add some stuff here. Maybe just some extension of kind of the cliff with some of this stuff kind of growing over. And again, I want it to vignette and have it kind of fade into the water there. Maybe lasso out of shape here so I can get some nice edges. It might be a little too harsh, so maybe it's just better to kind of just draw it in. Because I definitely want it to kind of vignette and have the shapes kind of blend and have like the water kind of seeping through here. Maybe just some like plumes of like mist, things like that. Let's go ahead and just add a little bit more simplification over here and just kind of help define that area a little bit. I love this brush here, by the way. If you guys haven't used it, it's the A Texture 20. Be sure to check it out. It's a really nice brush. Has a really nice bristle and feel to it, you know. Gonna go ahead and just kind of start simplifying some of this stuff. Maybe use a little bit of the smudge tool, sample all layers. I really like this like nice purpley cool tone. It gives a nice vibrancy and range. Again, maybe some more like variation of grass or crops or something there. You know, it might be kind of cool is adding just a little bit of an additional man-made structure here. Just something that's, you know, we're just suggesting that there's like an object or some sort of building here, just to kind of vary it up, you know. All right, now we are roughly about around an hour mark here, and you know, I feel that, you know, a lot of the decisions that we're going to be making from this point on is just some of the smaller refinements, okay, which is whether it's in color variation, or you know, refining some of the shapes a little bit more. But I definitely think that, you know, we have a majority of our major elements blocked in fairly nicely. So I'm just going to make sure that, you know, we kind of take the time here to just kind of add a little bit more subtle color. I wanted to add a little bit more of like the earth or some sort of like cliff, so it's not just pure green, you know, and have it kind of transition and really play with the edges here. Just have things kind of disappear and vignette a little bit. I still have to resolve that little that mound there. It's clearly unfinished. You know, still has the overlay effect on there. Maybe we can add some more terrain over here. So I'm using the pattern stamp to just kind of lay in some darker rock-like material, and then I'm gonna add in some tree line here, so we kind of get the illusion of like some sort of rock texture or some sort of like, you know, soil or something. You know, so it's not just all, you know, foliage or tree line. Again, just getting a little bit more variety of color here using the pattern stamp tool. Sometimes it's not always going to work. You know, I'm just kind of testing out just to kind of get a range. And again, these textures that I found are actually textures of grass. So if you guys are planning on making your own textures, you know, be sure to take photographs or you know, find some images of some sort of grass or, you know, something that kind of resembles like green foliage or something like that. All right, I'm gonna just reinforce the shape here. Obviously, this area needs to be closed, more round. I'm just gonna clean up the shape here on the tree line, and I'm just gonna open this up because it's creating like a weird little tangent here. So I'm gonna open it up so that we kind of get a nice, again, like a nice lost edge right here. I think it'll make for just a nice area for our eye to kind of transition out. Let's go ahead and draw in some like just some techie details, something that can help, you know, describe the form here. Let's go down to like 1 pixel. I just need some sort of visual aesthetic that says that this is a round form, and I'm doing that with contour lines. It just makes it instantly feel really nice and kind of industrial looking, you know? Maybe put in like another contour line here. Kind of looks like a little bit like a face, so I'm just gonna go ahead and edit this out just a little bit. Graphic designs are really tricky. I mean, especially something that's supposed to be, you know, kind of an industrial graphic design look. I always found it to be very, very hard to do, you know, because it has to look purposeful. It has to kind of look, and it has to look cool. It can't just be like a stripe or some random shape. It has to have some sort of, it has to have like a nice looking aesthetic to it, whether it's like cut lines or something. It has to feel somewhat manufactured, you know. So that was like one of the trickiest things for me to resolve. All right. Let's go ahead and add just a little bit more slight definition here. Just some extra little marks. Pull from a distance, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of compress this, collapse the image here. Let's go ahead and just kind of start fixing some of this stuff here. I was starting to play with like some shapes here, like using the shape tool. But I don't think it's something that we need. I just kind of wanted to try it out, but we're just going to go ahead and manually just paint this stuff out. Kind of pick a color and just kind of desaturate this area a little bit, so it kind of feels like it's in the right place. It felt a little too cyan, so I'm just going to knock it back a little bit. I definitely think one of the challenges here is showing a bit more structure to the waterfall, because it can feel very muddy really quickly, you know. So I'm trying to use the light and shadow to have some sense of area of light versus area of shadow, and still making it feel dynamic. So I'm going to lighten this up just a little bit here. And I'm adding a little bit of this yellow because I was looking at this one photograph of waterfalls, and you can actually see a little bit of yellow, of kind of like a warm light or a warm color palette as the water turns white. It was a bizarre transition. It almost kind of indicated that the water was a little, muddy, not as clear. So that was something interesting that I noticed. I'm just adding a little bit of warm light here as well. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of slightly refine this edge a little bit. Again, don't want to kill it. I still want to retain the spirit of the sketch. So I'm going to use a texture brush just to kind of give it a nice swift kind of gesture here. Maybe something a little bit more bluish. Maybe a little bit brighter. There we go. And notice how loose I'm being with it. I'm only spending maybe 2 to 3 marks on it. And I'm not trying to refine it to the point where it's very detailed, because we already have a very detailed object. I remember someone telling me, a good painting has a series of, small speed paintings. So I was thinking about that. I was like, what does that mean? Basically, the conclusion that I came to was, anything that's outside of the focal point, when we look at the corner of a painting, it's almost going to represent a small painting, a small loose sketch. And so it kind of taught me a very valuable lesson, that even as I'm painting this tree right here, I don't want to overwork it. I still want it to have the spirit of the sketch. I want it to feel alive. I want it to feel loose. So this is going to be treated like a small sketch. It's going to be treated like as if I'm doing a speed painting, So I don't want to kill it or overdo it. you know, by over rendering it or anything like that. So I want to try to loosely indicate what I think might be appropriate for a tree or a shrub here. And I'm going to do the same here. Just making the necessary marks. And maybe just a bigger one right here. And that kind of already quickly indicates and allows us to kind of understand, like, oh, okay, there's some trees. You know, there's some nice tree shapes. Just adding some small marks here. Maybe there's a gesture of a tree line top canopy up here. But keeping it very loose, very gestural. It's easy to overwork these things. Slightly refine it. And I definitely want to add a little bit to the sky. I'm going to go ahead and put it on darken. Just going to add a little bit of pink to the sky. You know, just so that it's not just a bleak white sky. Maybe add a little bit of a texture brush here. Put on darken. And just kind of give it some nice painterly strokes here. Let's go ahead and use this brush. This brush is better. The Texture 06. It has a really nice tooth to it. I'm just gonna go ahead and do some horizontal, some vertical lines here. I'm gonna go ahead and pick a little bit of a blue, brighten it up, so that kind of has a nice transition of warm to cool. All right. Well, there we have it. I'm going to go ahead and just do a copy merge. Sign this guy here in the corner. I'm going to go ahead and actually sharpen this. Just to make sure we kind of emphasize the focal point a little bit. And again, at this point, like I still find little tiny things that I want to fix. I'm like, oh man, there's something that I can add here. Let's go ahead and break this up. It's funny. I always do that when I look at a sketch. I'm like, oh yeah, it's done. All right, cool. Let's call it a day. And then right when I'm about to save, I look at it and I go, all right, there's something really weird going on. Let's go ahead and fix that. So a couple of things that I'm seeing is, you know, this part feels incomplete. You know, I think I can add another little piece right here, just to kind of mirror or echo the design language. Maybe add just something here. I feel that it's a little empty. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit. Maybe add in that yellow graphic. Just so it's a little consistent here. Add it in right here. And maybe we can see a little bit of that edge. I'm going to pick a lighter value. We're just going to say that is catching a little bit of that, a little bit of light here. maybe the side of like a radar dish or something mechanical. I was thinking like maybe it's like spouting like water through these vents or something, but it might look a little cheesy, so let's just go ahead and get rid of that. Add another little, maybe another little like radar dish or something here with a little cast shadow. Just some last minute refinements on the shadow side. Just make sure that some of these shapes are nice and clear. All right. Maybe just add a little bit of blue right here. Again, it's just a little bit of that reflected light or the fill light coming in from the top. You know, again, I want to make sure we stick with that rule of thumb. Anything that's in shadow is going to get a little bit of that blue. Okay, awesome, guys. Well, this pretty much concludes the demo. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and be sure to tune in for the last portion on how to make pattern stamps. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, so I just want to show you guys kind of the process of creating textures when I'm using the pattern stamp tool. So what the pattern stamp tool is, basically it's underneath the clone stamp, and all you do is you hold it down, and it will actually come with very default settings here. And you'll notice I'll actually choose a brush here, and as you paint, you will see that it emulates, or it paints literally what's in this sampling right here. And now there's different modes. You can actually align the textures so that whatever you paint, it will basically be revealing basically what the textures are doing. Or you can put it on impressionist mode, and it'll sample the colors, and it'll give you kind of this craziness, right? So this is something that I use, and what I like to do is I always like to use my own textures. I'm going to bring up a little set here so you guys can see. And I like to import textures that I found, either, you know, things online that's ambiguous enough, or things that I've made, or I've scanned in. And I like using various textures for various reasons, because it gives you so much variety of shapes, color, and just grittiness. So this is something that I love to have you guys just try out. And I like to just create a bunch of textures in here and just kind of bring them in. And some of it can be really low res, it can be really high res. It doesn't really matter. It's just as long as the texture is cool and it works for you. And a lot of times, if you have things like, you know, text here, you can always kind of blend it out. But what's great about this is that I can now import this into my pattern stamp mode. So the way you do that is you go into the layer, you go into edit, and you go define pattern. It's going to ask you to name the pattern. You can call it like green, and let's go ahead and do another one. Define pattern, brown, and let's do another one right here. Define pattern, and we'll call this one blue. Okay, so we have 3 different distinct patterns that we've kind of imported here. And I'm going to go to my pattern stamp here, and you'll notice that there's 3 basically thumbnails that popped up here, and I'm literally painting with this. Now if you take it out of impressionist mode and paint, notice how I'm painting literally the pattern that I imported. This is just a lazy man's tool of importing patterns without having to drag it into your scene, but it's great to paint just to get a little bit of color and just some variety, especially when you're drawing and you're painting, as you've seen in my previous demos where we have an object here or a character of some sort and you want to import the pattern. A great way to kind of get some color, some variety, and just instant textures. So this is a great little tool that I've been utilizing in all the demos, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the rest of the demo. Thanks.